Return to the story of John Demjanjuk, who's going on trial for war crimes in Germany. We talked to the lawyer who defended Mr. Demjanjuk when he was on trial in Israel. Yoram Sheftel explains what made him believe that John Demjanjuk was not a Nazi criminal.
With me, I have Yoram Sheftel, the Israeli lawyer who defended John Demjanjuk when he was tried in Israel. Mr. Sheftel, thank you very much for joining us here on RT. What made you decide to take the case?
I took the case because I was convinced right from the beginning that there is no credible evidence to tie Demjanjuk to the Holocaust, generally speaking, and specifically to Treblinka. And also I had an interview with him of about 2.5 hours before I made my final decision. And from that interview, I came fully convinced that the man never put his foot in Treblinka.
You never thought he was Ivan the Terrible, and as you say, you met with him and you write in your book that he was the simplest of individuals with quite limited intellectual capacity. You say he had a very bad memory. But how do you know he wasn't acting and merely pulling the wool over your eyes?
Very simple test, which I'm astonished as a Jew, as an Israeli, that our Israeli Jewish police and our Israeli Jewish prosecution didn't use this ali. I was mentioning time and again the Yiddish word to Demjanjuk of Gewalt, which is the word that the Jews that were forced to go to the gas chambers, to the slaughter, to this slaughterhouse, were shouting in Yiddish. I was fully convinced that it was the first time he heard this word.
What does Gewalt mean?
Gewalt, kind of where Yiddish is a non-translatable language, but Gewalt is something horrible is going to happen, and like a cry of desperation.
You've been typecast as Satan's lawyer and sometimes described as the most hated man in Israel. How do you respond to these accusations? Did you not feel that in some way you were perhaps a traitor to your own people for defending someone like him?
I defended him because I was convinced that he's not a Nazi. And I didn't dispute the Holocaust. I didn't dispute that 900,000 Jews were slaughtered in Treblinka. And I didn't dispute any of the crimes attributed to Ivan the Terrible. I disputed only one fact. The man in the theater hall that was converted to a courtroom is not Ivan the Terrible. That was my case, nothing else.
You've been accused of taking the case to further your own political career, and you once wrote that joining the defense was the wisest decision I have ever taken in my life. What is your defense against your critics?
First of all, I really don't know where from come this political matter, because I never had, I don't have, and I shall never have any political career. B, I think it's the worst thing you can think of if you think about political career, becoming the lawyer of someone that the entire country looked as Ivan the Terrible. So this I really, actually the first time that I hear about my political aspirations as far as joining this case. Yes, definitely it was the wisest decision, since it's one of the most important cases of the 20th century, and I think rarely prosecutors were defeated so heavily and so unequivocally, and also it was possible to show how all of them, I mean the Americans and the Israelis, were first and foremost dishonest. This case is not a case of mistaken identity. This case, as was ruled by the Federal Court of Appeal of the Sixth Circuit, is a case of fraud on the court, because all through the proceedings they knew that Demjanjuk is not Ivan the Terrible, based on the very same evidence that in the end of the day I discovered them and are the basis for his acquittal.
Why? Why was it so important for them to convict him?
Very simple. This is a typical bureaucratic blunder. The OSI was established in 1976. Very short time afterwards, they discovered Ivan the Terrible. Within months, they became a whole big apparatus with big government funding, employees, bosses, and whatever, and heroes as well. And when 12 months later, the Soviets told them, look, you got it all wrong, and they sent them the material, which proves that Ivan the Terrible is not Ivan Demjanjuk, then they simply concealed it because they didn't want to, how shall I say, to make smaller their bureaucratic empire. Simple as that. And then other bodies, from political and other reasons, collaborated with them. And specifically, of course, Israel, which thought that the Demjanjuk case will be a second Eichmann trial.